Marin Fire History proudly presents Families in Fire. The story of the generations of fire service personnel in Marin County.
Good day and welcome to Families in Fire from Marin Fire History. This morning we're with two brothers, Steve and Larry Bogel, and we're going to talk to them about how they got interested in the fire service and why they made that choice when they did. So, good morning, Steve. Good morning, Larry.
Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Paul.
And Steve, why don't we start with you? How did you get interested in the fire service?
I got interested very, very young. As a boy, probably 14, 15 years old, because we lived in southern Marin, and there was a lot of grass fires. And it was in those days, you could join and help out because the responding may only have one or two people on the unit.
Okay.
And I pulled hose and had backpacks on, Indian backpack, spot fires.
Wet gunny sacks?
No, I didn't ever use the gunny sack.
Okay.
But bottom line, to my surprise, it took my name, and I got a little check from the county. So here I was less than 16 years old because I wasn't driving.
Okay.
So I got two of those early paychecks from the county. I say that was the beginning of my professional fire career. Being paid.
What was it, a couple of bucks back then?
I think it was $15.
Okay. For an afternoon's work.
Yeah, right.
And for a young high school kid.
Hey, I didn't expect to get paid.
Sure.
So that was it. And then life goes on.
Yep.
And brother Larry, he gets involved in the fire service there because he loves to drive trucks. We'll talk about that, I'm sure.
Okay.
But I thought to myself, how boring, because you're just waiting for a fire to happen. Mopping floors was my something had to be more exciting for that.
Right.
But Larry joined the Tiburon Fire Department. He'll talk all about that. But when I came out of the Army, Larry was in the Army. And I said, geez. Through Larry, I learned about the resident fire program, sleepers.
Yep.
So I've been living in barracks in Korea and all over the place. I can do that because I don't want to pay any rent. I want to save my money. And I want to buy property, and that was my goal. Mm-hmm. But it was through the Tiburon Fire Department I learned that there's more to the fire service than just mopping floors and waiting for the call.
So let me ask you this, Steve. When you were a young man just out of service, your first experience was as a sleeper with Tiburon then?
Correct.
Oh, wow. And who was fire chief then?
Pardon me?
Who was their fire chief?
Frank Busher.
Oh, Frank Busher was chief.
Frank Busher.
And he wasn't much older than you then.
A few years older.
Yeah.
But he was a good guy.
Yeah.
And I think well liked by everyone. But he was a progressive chief.
He was.
And I think Larry can talk about the earlier history there.
Okay.
When he got appointed. But anyway, I found an interest in this.
Sure.
So I started going to the fire classes at College Marin. And then Frank was also good friends with the new chief in Sausalito, Buck Maston. And there was an opening, and there was several hundred people who applied. And Novato had an opening at the same time. But my interests in real estate were in San Francisco at the time. So I didn't want to go to Novato, so I concentrated on Sausalito.
Okay.
And I got the position. And following me was Steve Osborne.
Yep.
And then what other fellow there?
And what year was this, Steve?
That was 1966.
1966. And you went to work for Buck Maston then?
Yeah, and nice. I continued to sleep in the Tiburon Fire Department off duty. So I got a couple more years as a volunteer.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Now, how about you, Larry? What got you interested in a career in the fire service?
Well, it was totally by accident. At age 18, I was going to College of Marin, had no idea what I wanted to do. And Tiburon was establishing, through Chief Pusher, this resident volunteer program. Mm-hmm. Sleepers at the time.
Right.
And I was pretty well acquainted with Frank because I'd chased a couple of fires here and there. And so he asked me if I'd like to move in, and I said, sure. And he explained what would be required. We'd have to spend so many hours there each night there and so on.
Sure.
And so I immediately agreed, but then I was only 18.
So
then,
you were 18 at the time.
right.
Oh, okay.
So I had to get a written letter from either my mother or my father. Mom wrote a letter to Chief Frank giving her permission. First they tried to talk me out of this they didn't want me, my folks didn't want me doing this. Tried to talk me out of it. I finally convinced them that this is, let me try it. They were afraid my grades would suffer
Oh, got it.
at college and that. So I said, well, okay, if they do suffer, then I will give it up. And I was able to move in. And most of this was written about in my Took It Out of the House that I've submitted already.
Yeah, we watched that. We have that on Marin Fire History on our webpage there.
Oh, okay.
Your article, yeah. So if our viewers would like to refer to that, Your Ticket Out of the House was a great written article.
Well.
And then, so you started as a sleeper down in Tiburon.
Right.
And then you had a little 2-year hiatus, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I was there. I was actually paid for 2 years. Well, let me back up just a little bit. I lived in the fire station for 6 months, and I realized just kind of light bulb came on. This is what I want to do. I really want to do this. And 6 months later, I started in January of 61. In December, one of the paid guys, Clive Coverdale, was a volunteer in Larkspur. And it was hired in Tiburon. He was there about a year or so, and an opening came up in Larkspur. And he applied and was hired, and that's where his heart was Larkspur. So here's an opening in Tiburon, and Chief Frank just said, Larry, Clive's taking a job in Larkspur. Would you like to have his job? Sure, I'll take it. That's how easy it was.
Oh, wow.
That's how easy it was. No competition, no testing or anything. But he already knew me pretty well because I'd been there a year.
You were given product. He knew who you were, and he knew you would work well for him and fit in well, so he offered you the position. As we talked about this back in those days, oftentimes that's the way it was.
And that's how he liked to hire out of the volunteers, because he knew, you know your volunteers.
Right.
And that's how he did most of the hiring, was right out of the volunteers, until not too many years later, it started getting more competitive. Benefits got better. A lot more people were interested. And so then you couldn't do that anymore.
Well, and that's where Steve talks about the competition.
Yeah.
It's just a few years later, there was more than 100 people in line to take the test.
But I think to add to that, the sweeper program, or as a volunteer, either made you or broke you.
True.
You became known. Either you're a real good candidate, or no way, Jose, you'd never be recommended in any department. But it'd be you would never hear a word about that, But the word would be out.
The
Right.
word would be out, definitely.
Yeah.
And the chiefs would talk amongst themselves, of course,
Yeah.
and here's a good guy, and maybe there's an opening in, another community. And oftentimes you get a very good recommendation, They'd like everybody, all the chiefs want to see people succeed, and maybe they hate to see them leave because they'd like to pick them up, but it just wasn't an opening in that department. I was there. I was paid in December of 61. I was there for 2 years, and then I was drafted in the Army in March of 64. Actually, that's a little more than 2 years, and spent a couple years in the Army.
And then what happened? Chief Frank give you your job back when you returned?
Well, let me back up again. The firefighters were needed in Fort Rucker, Alabama, which is the Army's aviation center.
Right.
I was assigned there. This is when Vietnam started getting hot and heavy. So I was so lucky. I was assigned to a crash and rescue station in Alabama, and loved it. I was also loved that part of my career and development and so forth. I didn't particularly like Alabama, but at least they weren't shooting at me.
Right. Well, that being said, Larry, as a young man, you had some experience with Tiburon, then you really got a different perspective of firefighting and a different kind of atmosphere
Totally
with the Army.
Right.
But it adds to your experience, adds to your training, adds to your knowledge.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
While I was there in the Army, Frank and I would correspond. He'd write a lot of letters. I'd be sending letters back, and sort of kept in touch. Plus, my wonderful parents gave me a subscription to the IJ. It was mailed to me. And then Frank offered me, he didn't offer, he just said that you're being promoted from firefighter to engineer. While I was in the service, I was actually promoted. So I was able to jump into that slot very nicely and very easily, because that was one of my favorite things to do, was be driving. So that worked out.
Yeah, that sounds great. And then, you came back from your 2 years in the Army and went right back to work for Tiburon, and older, wiser, and enjoying what you had, right?
Exactly.
You also got credit for your military time, too.
Oh, thank you for reminding me of that.
Yeah.
The generosity of Tiburon Fire District was they paid into my retirement while I was gone. In the PERS. They didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
But they did, and I didn't really appreciate how good that was until I was nearing retirement age.
Yeah.
And so that was really nice of them.
Yeah.
So I got the feeling they wanted me to come back, so I came back.
It's good. So go back to Steve here. You started with Tiburon,
Correct.
and then a position opened up with Sausalito, and you went to work for them.
Correct.
And you started out as a rookie firefighter in 66.
March of 66.
Okay.
March 1st.
All right.
66 hired. And it was a great opportunity. What I liked about the fire service, or I liked about Sausalito, because I saw it happening in Tiburon, you could have virtually in those days create your own position if you had a special interest.
Okay.
And I had an interest in fire prevention.
Okay.
And fire prevention was a great thing for me because I'm more of a lone wolf type person. It got me out of the firehouse.
Now.
It got me away from mopping floors and running around with a grease rag. But it got me out into the community, and I was able to establish myself in Sausalito as a fire prevention officer. And as such, my goal was to just keep making things better. Not hammer them into the ground. You got to do, here's all these violations. So hence, many years in the future, I was named Sausalito Business Citizen of the Year.
Oh, you were integral with the shop and business owners.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
They all knew me. I think it goes back to so many of us coming out of the volunteers. That in the fire service, I mean, you were paid to be a firefighter, but there's all these other opportunities to do things.
Sure.
And you volunteered to do those things. People in training were putting on training burns, all volunteer, everybody show up. Nobody expected to be paid to go to the oil fire schools that we held outside Santa Fe.
Right.
All those kind of things were going on.
Yeah.
And in those days, there was a lot of camaraderie within the fire department because everybody lived close.
They did.
The department. Mm-hmm. And there was baseball games, all these, there was all kinds of competition between departments and everything. It was good fellowship, good times.
Yeah. So I get it. The world changes, and I'm not in charge of that.
Yeah. Thankfully.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you guys, what was it like having your brother across the road, if you will? Was there because of competition? Was there chit-chat going back and forth? How'd that work, Larry?
First of all, I can never recall us ever fighting a fire together.
Yeah.
Which I thought was, when you raised that question, I was thinking, I can't recall ever fighting a fire with Steve.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when did you go to Days?
when I became chief.
Okay, so your whole career, except when you became fire chief, was all shift work.
Well, the educational requirements today, I mean, the guys coming in today, guys and gals coming in today are obviously far more educated than I am, and the requirements are, so much more difficult to achieve, really.
And how was it compared to when you started to when you retired?
Well, as I mentioned, I was offered the job as a firefighter with no competition.
Sure.
Nobody else in the department even knew about it. I happened to be a volunteer living in the station, and I was offered a job, and I accepted it, and I was so glad I did.
Well, we'd like to thank everybody today for joining us on Families in Fire. Especially like to thank Steve and Larry Bogel for their interview and their time today. Now, if you have any families in fire that you know about or you're aware of, please send us that information at marinfirehistory@gmail.com. Thank you.